And we're going to do a couple of breakouts here too, so you get to all engage with one another instead of having me talk at you, which I think will be a lot more fun as well. As I mentioned, about 36% of CHROs are really focused as a top priority on this notion of inclusive leadership, right? And again, I think this is what you are all hardwired to do in terms of what you do together and how you build muscles around the ability to do that at your companies. I want to talk about 5 keys to inclusive leadership when it comes to writing your own future of work, okay? First one is writing your future state together. We'll talk about modeling leadership behaviors, reinforcing actions, learning and growing, framing and frequent celebration. I want you to notice there's a number on your table. So take a look at that so that you can pay special attention to whatever number you're going to be talking about at your table, which is the way that's going to work. So that way everyone's not going to be talking about the same thing, but you'll deal with whatever area and then you can report out, okay? So the first one, we talk about writing your future state together. It's really, the 2 examples I would give about this would be, think about Martin Luther King, right? I have a dream speech. He didn't write, I have a plan, right? He had to do something that was inspiring, that was uplifting, right? I worked for a company out of Toronto recently who basically were $500 million company. They want to be $1 billion company someday. They've had all this growth. He said, you know what, I've got all these A players, but I don't feel like they're functioning as an A team. Would you come and work with me and them? So I'm there for a day, and certainly there were some opportunities to work together, but I had to break it to the CEO at the end of the day. I said, you know that nobody cares about being $1 billion company, don't you? And he just stops in his tracks. He said, you're kidding me. I said, no. I said, they don't care at all. I said, but you know what they care about? They love what they make. And if you imagine framing this from the perspective of being able to say, look, if we become a larger company and we can extend the reach of what we do and put this product that we make so well and that you're so proud of into the hands of more people to change more people's lives, that's why we want to become $1 billion company. That's why we want to grow the way we do. You know, you're not talking to your bank here, right? You're talking to people who you want to uplift and inspire and make them feel part of something purposeful. And I think as we think about this at our companies, imagine now a future where we start thinking to ourselves, how do we inspire our companies, our people, if you will, to something larger? The why not us piece I love to put, so I'm from Boston, so yes, I have to put some Red Sox baseball in here somewhere in this thing, okay? Back in 2004, they broke the curse. It was the first time in 86 years they had won the World Series. They had lost to the Yankees the previous year, and here they are, down 3-0 to the Yankees, right, for the American League Championship Series. No team in the history of Major League Baseball has ever come back from 3 down to win a 7-game series. And the team started saying, look, we can't lose this again. We've been through spring training, 162-game season, all the playoffs and everything. We can't lie down here. No one's ever done it before. Why not us? Right? So they took 1 game at a time, and they won, game 4. And by the way, they lost game 3, 19-8. So it wasn't feeling really good about going into game 4. And yet here they go, win game 4, 5, 6. And by the way, they blew them out in game 7 to only then go and win the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. Sometimes when we're setting, here you go.
I'm a St. Louis Cardinal fan.
I know. It's interesting because sometimes when we set really lofty goals and our people don't feel like they're necessarily up to that task, part of it is inspiring them to believe, why not us? Why can't we do this, right? Why does it have to be somebody else? Second piece I want to talk about is really about modeling leadership behaviors. It's right. So if you're going to aspire to this future, what are you as a leader going to do to change the way people start seeing what the priorities and what this vision is all about? So one of the stories I love to tell, which also speaks to what we'll get into much more in depth a little later, is about psychological safety. And this is about Alan Mullally's tenure as CEO of Ford between 2006 and 2014. At that company, he joins the company, and it was a command and control culture doesn't even begin to touch it. The fear, the anxiety of the employees there, even at the most highest levels, was that if you ever admitted to having a problem or something going on, you're likely to find your desk cleaned out by the time you admitted it in an open meeting. So here's Alan Mulally, who's now got all his direct reports in front of him, reporting out on their dashboards. They were losing $17 billion at the time, by the way. So he goes around the room. Green, yellow, or red, right? Green, everything's great. Yellow, something a little cautionary. Red, we get a problem here. What does he do? He goes all around, and what happens? Everybody reports green on everything. Could there be worse news as a CEO than that? Everything's firing on all cylinders. We're losing $17 billion, but okay. So he's got to get these guys to admit that, okay, let's talk about what we need to talk about here. And he was relentless about trying to get that openness. And quite frankly, it took him a long time. It took him months. And finally, someone raises their hand in a meeting, and he says, I've got a problem over here. And he stood up and he clapped. And he said, all hands on deck. We're going to help him fix what he needs to get fixed. It was weeks later before a second person, a third, and finally a fourth. And they started turning that culture around ever so slowly. But now all of a sudden they were able to address, what they were dealing with. I mean, when you think about that, and again, modeling that leadership and really not only requesting a change in the culture, but really, driving it, I think, in a very powerful way. And obviously, it speaks to the incredible performance of Ford next to the other automakers during that time. One of my favorite books, when I started my PR firm, which I had for about 5 years in the mid-90s into 2000, I kind of modeled it after this idea of the customer comes second. It was a book by Hal Rosenbluth and Diane McFerrin Peters, and it was about Rosenbluth travel. And much of it was subscribed to the same notion that we recognize with Herb Kelleher and all that, right? This idea, right, of the customer comes second, so the employees come first. So I was intrigued by the idea. I kind of built our whole philosophy around, but as I was reading the introduction, I'm thinking, what could this book possibly be about, right? Because it's not like you don't understand, okay, employees first, because they'll deliver for your customers, I get it. Now what are we talking about? What we're really talking about is the reinforcing actions and the overlapping nature of every single thing they did in the company. So if you're going to be, let's say, if you have a company and you're all about team stuff, but all of your compensation, all of your awards, all of your rewards, everything else is all about the individual, then you're not really about teams at all at the end of the day. So it's about figuring out what is it that we really want to do, and how do we make sure in every single department in the company, every single leader, every single person has policies and procedures and actions and ideas that are in line with what we're really trying to accomplish. We're back to the learning achieving cycle, because this is huge, right? And we're even going to talk about this more, because there's nothing more important than being in that learning zone, learning and growing and getting better every single day. That's what's going to make us better. So be thinking in your own companies about how do we grow our people? How do we grow the individuals? How do we grow our team members? How do we identify where people's strengths are, what they love to do, how they can add value in a way that's really powerful? And we want to look at that. And finally, and I'm going to tell two stories around this, because this is a bit of a favorite of mine, because I'm not one who's very excited about this advice where we said, keep your eye on the prize. For me, in many respects, I think that's the stupidest advice you could possibly have. I love the idea that there's a vision out there and there's a prize out there and there's a goal, but the more we fixate on it, the less likely we are to get there. Again, I'm going to offer two examples. This is Mount Teocalli. I took my daughters on a hike there because they wanted to climb a peak. They were like 11 and 12 years old at the time, and they said, Dad, we want to climb a peak. And I'm like, great. Here's what you got to do to get ready and prepared and be thinking about what we're doing. And by the way, we're going to leave at about 6 in the morning because you want to be off the mountain before noon, because the last place you want to be with afternoon thunderstorms is on top of a big rock in Colorado. So anyway, we embark on this journey at 6 a.m. and we're climbing and doing our thing, and we get above the tree line. And all of a sudden, of course, you look up at that peak and it looks awfully far away. And all of a sudden now they're continuing to hike. And the next thing you know, my oldest says, boy, the view looks pretty good from here. Pretty good. You know, she's getting exhausted, right? Starting to feel that. Then my younger one sees this puff of white cloud up near the peak and says, Dad, is that weather coming in? I said, no, I think we're good. Right? So now they're climbing. Now you can see the exhaustion on their face. And it wasn't just the physical part, it was the mental piece, because they're focused on that peak. It's all they can think of. And if you've ever done this, the more you climb, you keep looking at that peak, it looks like it's never getting any closer. And it is just absolutely emotionally debilitating. So finally, they were like, Dad, I think we're done. I think this has been a great day. View's good. And I said, okay. I said, well, tell you what. I said, indulge me for a minute. Give me 10 minutes. I said, we're going to climb 10 more minutes, and then we'll see how you feel after 10 more minutes. And they're like, fine, 10 more minutes. They were like to the second, like, oh, let's go. There was a bush that was rather large that was in the rocks. And I said, let's kind of mark where we are. And they weren't really sure why I said that. But anyway, we climbed for 10 more minutes. They're looking at that peak, and they go, see, Dad, we're no closer than when we started. And I said, I want you to look behind you. And that bush was a tiny dot on the landscape. And they were like, whoa. I can't believe what we did, how far we went. Next thing you know, they're climbing for another 5, another 10, another 15. They made it to the top that day. Both of them are leaders in business today. They will tell you that they remember that story anytime they're ever dealing with anything difficult and they have to go through, and they recognize the importance of understanding our progress, measuring those small wins, and that's what gives us the fuel to kind of get where we need to go. Next example I want to give on framing is about running. So I don't run marathons and all that stuff anymore, but I used to love long runs. And there are those days sometimes. She looks really happy running, probably happier than I ever was when I was running. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, there were some days where I'd be on. Maybe I've got a 20-mile run that day, and at the 18-mile mark, I'm just exhausted. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have to just kind of run it in. So what I would do, right, like a lot of people do, I run as far as I can. When I'm done, I just stop. And then when I kind of feel like it, okay, I'll start up. And then, and I'll stop when I'm too tired. And then I finally get to the end. And I remember someone said to me, you've got it all wrong. He said, when you get yourself in that position, and it all happens to all of us, he said, what I want you to do is pick a spot, run to it, and declare victory. Then I want you to walk for a while, and then when you're ready to run, pick another spot and declare victory again. He said the difference between those repeated failures that you experience the way you're doing it and the victories that you can get one after another will not only help you get through those 2 miles easier, it's going to give you the confidence to do this next time you go out there. And I think it's really great advice, but it gets us thinking about how do we frame things? How do we help our people frame things in a way that makes things palatable for them and makes things so that we're not emotionally and physically exhausting them, right? So, inclusive leadership breakout. And I'm going to go back here just to this list because this will be easier for everyone when we look. So, 1 through 5. If you were at table 1, I want you to write your I have a dream speech for one of your companies. You can pick one among the table if you like. But whatever your I have a dream speech, whatever that vision, whatever you're going to say to inspire your people for the next, call it year, 2, 3, that would be great. Table 2s, or if you have 2 on your table, talk about how you are going to model leadership based on the vision that you're trying to achieve. So in other words, what changes for you as a leader to send a message to your people about where we're going and why and what this is all about. 3rd, reinforcing actions. What would it take, based on the vision that you pick among someone at your table, to make sure that you are behaving in a manner that supports exactly what it is you're trying to do across all areas of your company? 4th, learning and growing. What will you do to make sure that people are learning and growing? By the way, one of the things, just as an aside here, we spend about $360 billion globally on executive development and training. I think it's the worst ROI on the planet. It's terrible. We wouldn't put up with it in any other part of the business. Not because the training's bad, not because the content's bad, not any of it. The problem is our people today are probably having to do more work in less time with fewer resources and everything than ever before. We've got no mechanism for them to be able to actually take what they learn and actually apply it in any serious way. Which is why, by the way, if you had peer groups actually operating side by side with teams in your companies where they actually focused on the individual and then how they could be a greater contributor to the team and how the team could take even those 1 or 2 things that you learned from some conference or some micro-learning and actually make it possible to be part of how you do things, it becomes huge. So be thinking about not only how people are going to learn and grow, but how are they going to really apply it and make sure it works for your business. And then finally, framing and frequent celebration. If you've got that big lofty goal out there, what are you going to do to get people in terms of framing that, and how are you going to celebrate in a way that really makes it exciting for people? So again, 1 through 5 on your table. Why don't we take, we'll give it 10 minutes and then we'll see how everyone's doing. If you need a little extra time, we will do that as well. Pick a spokesperson for your table. We're not going to have every table report out, but you never know if it's going to be you, so make sure you've got a spokesperson. Thank you. All right, everyone ready to report out? Craig, first of all, I want to ask, for those who have table 1, who believes they have just a soaring, I have a dream speech, or that convincing why not us argument for our employees? Right there? I love it. All right, Craig, do it. We're going to have one table report out on each.
Okay, sorry. Let's try that again. I have a dream where every leader in this room, we assist that leader to come up with the right solution to give the right information at a touch of a button anywhere using products and applications they already own. And I'm going to show you an example of one we did. We've done 3 developments in the last 60 days. And NCP Coatings, they have instant access to their information right here. All right.
Awesome. How empowering, right? Incredible. All right, table 2. Who wants to volunteer from table 2? Got it.
Yeah, so, leadership behaviors. We've got a big list. Talking to everybody, getting input, discussing mistakes objectively, being a servant leader, approachable, vulnerable, and have empathy. Practice what you preach, lead by example. Discuss how different options to solve problems affect others. Recognize we're all in it together, and that everyone is a leader and can be at any time. Broad participation in problem solving. Ask for feedback, and as a leader, ask for feedback, and as a leader, it's okay to model some less than perfect ideas and questions.
Nice. It's that power of we begins with each of us, right? Like when we had that triad and we think about the result in the middle, could be anything. It could be your accountability, your productivity, how much fun you have as an organization, but everybody plays a part in it. And I loved how much what you talked about was dialogue and conversation. So thank you for that. Table 3. Who wants to volunteer from table 3? This is great. Everyone wants to show their stuff.
Okay, so reinforcing actions that support the vision across all areas of the organization. One, we talked about modeling behaviors, that you want to see as the leader modeling those. So for one, vulnerability, owning up, saying, hey, I made a mistake and here's what I learned from it. Or 2, modeling accountability as the leader, making sure, if you committed to get something done, you're going to demonstrate to the team that, yes, I get my to-dos done and I expect the same from everybody else. 2, we talked about recognizing and calling out the behaviors that you want to see. So one thing that I try to do, we use Microsoft Teams as a communication tool, and I love to use that just as a quick shout out to say, hey, Ryan, great job, with XYZ last week. You really went above and beyond. Number 3, Leo, you had mentioned this around compensation. So Ryan talked about within his organization how they do have a profit sharing plan that everyone participates in. And then everyone understands how they contribute to the big picture, and that reinforces the importance of team and their culture. And then last, but certainly not least, is just showing that you care. So we talked about, we have some hourly people out in the field, just sending them a text message saying, hey, be careful today, it's raining, the ladder might be slippery, I'm thinking about you, be safe. Just doing those little touch points to demonstrate that you understand what's going on and you care about them as individuals. So that's our list of 5 reinforcing actions.
Thank you. All right, learning and growing. Table 4. Who wants to volunteer? Okay, right here. I thought they were so busy learning, they were just still at it. Here we go.
All right, we had learning and growing, and the most important thing we took from that is commitment and investment. That has to be made in that. So you need to schedule it just like you'd schedule anything on a calendar, so that your team knows that you're going to be doing this and be prepared. Use examples of content like GLS. Global leadership. That use content that's maybe relevant to what's going on, whether it's in their personal life or in the community or wherever that might be. but it also is a continuum that helps accomplish certain initiatives in the company. What is relevant right now to them, what's in front of them, and then have something that helps them both professionally and personally.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, just in the self-interest of the people, and also combining that learning and doing, right? That the learning piece isn't some side thing or something that you try to fit in. It's part of what you need to do and how you grow. So thank you. And last but not least, framing and celebration. Big one. We got to have lots of hoot and hollering here. All right, right up front row.
We had, I think we kind of came to two conclusions. The first natural one is just having goals that are celebrated. So the celebration of goals is kind of the obvious one. Getting into a little further, I think it came up with the special moments that have to be celebrated, especially little things that sometimes we don't consider, we might consider someone like accomplishing a specific goal that is furthering maybe the normal business. But I think the one thing that we came up with unique was it's almost the cultural special things that happen that achieve a bigger picture than just those number goals or financial goals. Some very, very simple things like just a group leader, if they've come up with a new idea, a new way of doing something that is also a cultural benefit to the company. Well, I think one of the examples was that that individual that managed that group sent out just thank you notes. Sometimes it's just those very simple thank you things that help build a culture and keep something good going. So anything else you had to add to that, Ray? Does that sum it up? Or?
No, you did a great job.
We never got to the point where we actually wrote down the results. We just kept talking, so I had to kind of wing it.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right. Really well done. And I'm sure all the conversations at the other tables are fantastic. And it's just really nice when you can have that kind of exchange and talk about what's going on in your respective organizations, for sure. Remember we had those 5 factors, right? Right people, psychological safety, productivity, accountability, and leadership. I like to think of this as going inside the 5 factors. And you'll see really this importance again of psychological safety. And we're going to dive into this. And I can imagine, and you know this well enough for your groups, right? Psychological safety is huge. Your ability to be open and vulnerable with one another. By the way, when I've done about, well, exactly actually 225 of these workshops with groups. And in the early stages of this, I would ask the group, hey, rate your psychological safety as a group on a scale of 1 to 10. Your ability to be open and vulnerable in a confidential environment. And everyone, one group after another goes, oh, we're a 10. We're a 10, no problem, right? I'd go through the rest of the workshop. I'm not feeling that level of 10 candor, so I'm thinking I got to go at this in another way. So I started asking that initial question, what do you think? Are you a 10? They go, yep. And then I'd go to each individual around the table and I would say, how well do you think you leverage that safe environment? How well do you access that? Number went to about an average of about 6 or 6.5. It was like shocking as people looking around each other thinking, wow, we're leaving a lot on the table here, right? It's kind of like going to a spa and you've got the steam gently rising off the water and if you immerse yourself in it, it'll be the most restorative, amazing experience in the whole world. You don't have one of these at home, and yet here you are, you're going to sit next to it and read a magazine, or maybe you'll dangle your feet in the water, but you're never going to get the full benefit of it. Every time you go to a group meeting, and you're not kind of immersing yourself, at least to the best of your ability. I mean, some of us are far more open than others, some are a little closer to the best, but at least challenge yourself to use that incredible environment that you probably may not have anywhere else in your life to be able to talk about your business and to talk about what is meaningful to you going forward, and make sure we don't lose that. But I do want to talk about this really more in the context of teams. And of course, again, the better you are able to do this in your groups, the better you're going to be able to foster this in your organization. So just to give it a definition, and I think this is a good one from Amy Edmondson, is a shared belief held by members of the team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Now, there are hundreds of journal articles all about psychological safety and what makes it work and what doesn't and all that. I think you can take all of that and boil it down to one sentence. Psychological safety is advanced when everyone simply gives each other the benefit of the doubt. And by the way, I thought I saw this a lot during COVID. I thought one of the great ironies in many respects was in so many companies, employees became closer together once we yanked them out of the office, right? Because we come together in a central workplace. We see each other for our titles and our positions and what we're doing and all that. Next thing you know, we're inside everyone's homes. We're seeing dogs and kids and artifacts behind them, and and we get a sense of their challenges, right? So all of a sudden, we start tapping into our shared humanity a little bit, and we start recognizing, we're just here to help each other out. And we started giving each other the benefit of the doubt, I think, a lot more, which in many situations, I think among peers actually strengthened the relationship among employees. Some work that I really love around this that I think is great is Timothy Clark's work, where he talks about this idea of psychological safety. First of all, that people feel they belong. So when you're interviewing someone and you want to make them feel, and you want to have comfort level that when you bring this person on board, that they're just going to be a good fit. Doesn't mean they can't have different ideas. You want that diversity, obviously, of course. But they've got to feel comfortable being on the team. They have to be able to ask questions in meetings, even if they think it's the, quote, stupid question, right? Which we know 3 or 4 other people sitting at the table have at the same time also, just someone's afraid to ask. They want to be able to contribute ideas, recognizing that maybe not every idea is going to be accepted, but it is going to be heard. And it's going to be heard with some real positive reception there. And finally, that you can challenge both either the process or you can challenge the leader sometimes. Be that leader who absolutely wants to be challenged, right? As long as it is really about the purpose of the organization, right? So, probably one of my favorite 2x2s. Many leaders do not want to focus a lot on psychological safety because they feel like, we're just going to make it kumbaya and comfortable and cozy for everyone. And that's, I need some accountability. I need this going on, right? Well, the reality is that psychological safety and accountability depend on one another. I had a CEO 3 weeks ago. It was at a break. CEOs talking to me about the fact, I've got this direct report and they're just not taking ownership over their area in the way that I want them to, right? So 2 guys were next to him and they're looking at him and they start to laugh. And I'm like, all right, what's the joke? And he said, that guy he's talking about, his direct report, he's scared to death of him. Of course he won't take ownership over what he does. He thinks one false move and he's going to have his head ripped off, right? So you've got to have that. They work hand in hand. What Amy Edmondson basically explains is this. When psychological safety is low and accountability is low, you're in the apathy zone. And that is obviously not a place you want to be, right? If psychological safety is super high, but you don't really have any accountability, that's the thing that many CEOs fear. They don't want people living in that comfort zone. That's just not really going to advance much of anything. Conversely, if psychological safety is low, people are afraid to do or say anything, and their accountability is super high, that's your anxiety zone. Those people are 3 to 6 months away from leaving your company. If, however, psychological safety is really high, accountability is really high, they're operating in that learning zone. Remember that learning achieving cycle? That's what operates inside that learning zone, whether it's in a group or whether it's in a team. If you have people playing there, that's where you want them. That's where you're going to leverage that talent that you're paying for. So when we think of it among peers, and I'll use this example for both groups and teams, when we think about, well, what does it take to make this possible? First of all, being connected to the purpose, right? And when I talked about Mullen-Lowe, we're there to create the best advertising in the world. No one's taking things personally because we all understand that we're not fighting against one another. We're fighting for the best ideas. So we understand why we are in the room. We have a mindset that recognizes that us being open and challenging one another and being vulnerable is important to our success. That is fueled oftentimes, especially, in groups and teams, and certainly with groups who, let's say, they think the environment's a 10, but they know they use it to like a 5. Oftentimes it's because they just don't really know each other well enough to feel that comfort level. And it's not because they don't know each other so much as they don't have that depth of like their business, but not their family, not who they are, not where they grew up, not experiences they had, which kind of break things down and allow for those more vulnerable conversations. We also know that from school, I don't know about you, but I certainly had my share of times where I didn't do the homework assignment. I came into school the next day, just fingers crossed that no one calls on me because it would just expose me for not having done what I was supposed to do. I don't think it's any different in work or in a group situation. The less prepared you are, the less safe you're going to feel. There's no question about that. 3 things too. When I talked about that pool, you as the listeners in a group meeting or in a meeting at your office or whatever, that's what provides the psychological safety to whoever is sharing. If people are checking their cell phones or looking out the window, that feels pretty awful if you're sharing anything of any consequence about what's happening with your life, or you're sharing an idea or whatever, and you know the room is half paying attention. Not great. Sharing behaviors. Once someone shares, whether it's in a company meeting or in a group meeting, and you recognize that there was not only no penalty for that sharing, but that person got incredible benefit, and by the way, so did a whole bunch of other people around the room, including me, then that gives me that kind of tacit permission that maybe I'm going to try it next time. Maybe I'm going to express that level of generosity and courage that is necessary to have that kind of a conversation. And then finally, we do things because they work. You know, a kid cries or whatever when we're figuring, little infants, right? They cry because they know that it works, you know. And we do things because they work. And if we feel that it is worth the result, then we'll share. If we feel that it's not worth the result, then we're probably not feeling like, why bother? Why put myself out there? I wanted a final thing before we go to a breakout on this. I did a symposium for Seton Hall University a number of years ago, and my focus at the time was on speaking truth to power. What does it take for an employee? How should that employee adopt a mindset that allows them to have the courage to go to the CEO, if necessary, and share what's on their mind? So first, I basically said to that employee, trust yourself, right? Consider it your responsibility to share your professional judgment. You know, what do you want to do? Be sitting there saying, yeah, I knew that was going to fail all along. I just didn't say anything about it. I mean, that's not a defensible position, right? Know your audience. Know your CEO. Know what they care about. Know how to communicate with them. Be prepared, right, for any question or anything you need, right? What inspires psychological safety? Preparation. Make your point succinctly. Do not bury the lead. Don't go into a once upon a time story with your CEO in the hope they're going to hang in with you, right? Say what you need. Provide the supporting evidence. Take it from there. Do so in the broader interest, not the self-interest. And this is really important about the understanding of why you are coming to, whether it's the CEO or a particular leader in the organization. Persuade. Do not take ceremonial positions, right? If it's worth the time to actually bring something to someone's attention, don't sit there and in the first question say, oh yeah, no, it's all right, it's not important, no big deal. It's like, well, don't come to me then, if you're going to fold like that, you know? Obviously, you're not going to push things beyond the point, but the idea is that you're coming there for a reason. Make your point. Be heard on it. Be patient, right? Because this person's getting this information possibly for the very first time. Let them process it a little bit, right? Understand that bad news is better coming from you than the outside, for sure. I mean, think about the challenge that all of you have in terms of getting really good information in real time that's actionable, that you can really rely on. So the fact that your people can be able to do this is huge. And then obviously trust your leadership, because there's going to be many times where that person's going to be offering, if I'm an employee and I'm offering advice to my CEO, let's face it, it's from my perspective, whatever it happens to be. If I'm in marketing, I'm in HR, legal, I don't have the bigger picture on it. Maybe he or she can tell me the whole story or not. But what I have to do is at least believe I've been heard and trust that the decision is made with that in mind.
Leo, question.
Yes?
I have a question. This is great. And you talked about providing a deck for the people here to share with their team. Is this something that's in that deck? So you could sit down with your team and say, where are we on these 10 items?
Well, they can have this deck too. How about that?
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
This would be great. To me, it would be a great conversation to have with your team to let them know these are the 10 commandments for truth to power.
Now, your responsibility is how do you help your employees speak their truth? So this was about now, this is years later, I finally maybe I should kind of approach this the other way, right? Trust your people, right? You hired them for a reason. Know your employee. Be patient. Be open to listening. After you've listened, use appreciative inquiry to learn more. It's not about putting them on the defensive, but it's being curious and letting them know that that's where you're coming from. Consider it your default position that their motives are in the broader interest. If it's not going to take a brain surgeon to figure it out. You're going to know that. Don't feel the need to respond in the moment. It's okay to want to gather more data, want to figure out what's going on. But then what you want to do, obviously, is get back to the employee, right? So if it's bad news, thank your employee for sharing it with you. And obviously, since I advised your employee to trust you, keep their vantage point in mind. Don't feel like, oh, that person gave me stupid advice. Well, they didn't give you stupid advice. They gave you advice that, resonates perfectly from their view of the world. Recognize that, appreciate that, and take it from there. But getting back to the employee, obviously, I think is really important, and just letting them know that they've been heard, and here's kind of where this is going. Now, one more Mentimeter question. Well, there's actually four statements in here that I need you to respond to. How would your employees, and I really want you to think about getting in the mind of your people, and how would they rate these statements on a scale of 1 to 5? 1, I feel safe to take a risk on this team. 2, it's okay to challenge the status quo or my manager. 3, we see mistakes as learning opportunities. And 4, questions are always welcome on our team. So how would your employees rate that on a scale of 1 to 5? And let's see what we come up with. Is everyone in? Psychological safety breakout. What we're going to do is I want each table to talk about what it's going to take in your organization to bring every one of those to a 5. What will you have to do? You'll be the Alan Mullally in your company. How do you get psychological safety where you want it in each of these 4 areas for your employees to answer 5 to every one of these 4 questions? You got some hints, a little bit, I think, on how to do it, a little bit, but clearly you can personalize this and make it your own. So let's take 10 minutes and do that. All right. Which table would like to share first? You guys were done fairly early. You guys on with the 4? Which one? Who's the spokesperson for this group? You want to know about this right here? Yeah. Done.
We thought, I guess the most important thing here is you have to create some sort of a process that allows people to know, hey, if we've got something, anytime they have something, there's a process that is always a standard. They know where they're going to go through it. They know they're going to be part of that process. They know someone's going to walk hand in hand with them through that process, right, wrong, or indifferent. And it's always consistent. They know what to expect, and they can walk through that and always get the same result as they go through it. So there's safety in the process of them coming forward, which would give them psychological ease or comfort, I guess I should say.
Nice, thank you. I think that's true of a lot of people. When they've got that structure, they feel secure in that. Thanks. Who else? Who wants to share? Let's get at least 2 others. Whatever works for you guys is fine.
I'm going to get a Chinese volunteer, Bob Bessie. You know what I'm
All right.
I want Bob to explain how MTI does strategic planning and execution of the strategic plan.
Okay, so for the next 3 hours, we'll be covering this. All right, we'll cover more of it if you're on the beer and bourbon tour with me later. Okay, so, and by the way, Dana Forsyth in our organization is here as well, so you can ask her. So on our strategic plan, while the goals and the objectives, the why we're doing it, are set by the executive team, and there are 5 of us on the executive team, the execution of the plan, how we're going to get it done, what gets done, the steps between here and year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however long we want to go with it, comes out of our leadership team, and there are 15 members of our leadership team. There are groups that drive each of our initiatives from the leadership team with an executive sponsor. I cover 2 of the initiatives, and we help drive them towards their goal. Now, it's interesting. One of the things that I will preach is try it, and if it doesn't work, just move on, all right? That one didn't work, great. Give me 5 other things that may or may not work, and let's just keep this thing going. Just keep falling forward on it, because eventually we're going to get to where our goal is. So executive team, but it's really the 15 members that are out there that are helping drive the initiatives, and then they in turn are working with their teams to make sure that we're meeting the goals that are out there. Does that summarize it?
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Fail, forward, it's okay to make mistakes.
And just that idea of an iterative process, right? Because in this world, we got to do it. Thank you. Yes.
I was going to say part of, I think what's most effective, what I've seen be really effective in my organization is the vulnerability, the transparency, the visibility to the mistakes that, you know, the CEO or CFO or COO make. And actually, we turn some of those into those big failures, the big misses that came really from the top down, are some of the stories that we tell around the table. So, you know, I think we're more willing to share ideas or to take risks because we joke all the time about the big misses that the leaders of the company have made, right? We can joke about it, and so there's this comfort and this you know, feeling that we can take those chances too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so funny. I had similar conversations with my team when I had my company when people were stressing out over certain things, and I'm like, I can screw up this thing way worse than you can from where you're sitting right now, so don't worry about it. You know, and it's true, and get them to feel that comfort level, right? Well, thank you. Does anyone have anything that they want to share? Because I don't want to leave anyone out. Yes?
I know we already had a representative from our table, but there was something else profound that I thought I'd mention. And to get it to 5, I think it makes sense to ask. And that didn't come from me, it came from someone else at the table, and I think that's really profound. We need to ask our employees, what does it take to get to 5? I mean, we can dream up all these different things, but if we're dreaming things that they're not caring about, kind of like the getting to $1 billion, I don't care about that, you know. Ask.
Thank you.
And then execute on.
And it's exactly what we talked about with the group yesterday, right? Is asking and have it come from them. We can make assumptions about what people's motivations are and what's going to unlock that, but the reality is we can find out directly from them. So yes, thank you. Anyone else? Anything that was particularly poignant from your table that you may want to share that hasn't been covered? Okay, we're good? So what this kind of comes down to, we talked about peer influence, right? This is how we influence one another, right? The impact we have on our behavior. Peer advantage takes place when we're more selective, strategic, and structured about the people we surround ourselves with. Peer innovation combines the words peer, people like me, and innovation, creativity realized. And it occurs when a carefully selected, diverse collection of people with a common purpose and shared values work together to make each other better and create something larger than themselves. It's what you do every month when you come together as a group, and it's what your teams are all about in terms of the kinds of things they can do together, for sure. You know, a really fun quote that I think was kind of, it occurred to me this morning to end on this when I wasn't correcting my title slide and probably the final slide as well. But I did add this quote from Sekou Andrews, which I thought was really kind of fun. So there's an incredible power that comes from surrounding yourself with communities in which you feel small among them, and they look at you like a giant. And when I think about being part of a group, and oftentimes, we come there thinking, wow, everybody around this table knows more than me. But yet the recognition should be that you have really special gifts to bring to that group as well. And once you own those gifts, and once you start learning about others, and realizing what everyone can contribute to one another's growth, it's incredibly powerful. I'm just so excited to be part of this time that you're having together, to be part of this journey that you're on when it comes to being part of these peer groups and kind of building muscles around the kinds of things that will help drive your organizations to even greater heights. So thank you so much for having me. This was great.